Welcome to the Campfire Curmudgeon Podcast. I'm Nick, and
I'm Heidi.
what are we talking about today?
Well, we're gonna veer a little bit.
We're gonna zag.
We're gonna zig and zag. It's not exactly ghosts,
Uh-huh.
and it's not exactly paranormal, but it's spooky, and
Okay.
it's kooky, and it's conspiracy theory.
It's altogether ooky.
It is that too.
Okay.
No, but it's a conspiracy theory, and I thought that kind of went along with our spooky campfire stories theme.
Sure.
Close
We've
enough.
covered conspiracy in the past. We did a whole
We
Illuminati
sure have.
episode.
Well, this one,
And joining
this
us
one's
is,
a little bit
Dante.
different. Yes, as you can hear him scratching himself. We've got our podcast cat here today. Dante, are you a podcast cat? Good boy.
He just goes, "Ah."
He does this weird meow while he also purrs, and it's like a gargle. So what are we discussing today?
Ambient noises.
It's a really big truck. I'm sorry.
It's not your fault.
No, it's a motorcycle. I lied.
Okay.
That's what happens when the podcast studio in my house is also the library that's in the front, very front of the house by the street.
Yes. Vroom vroom.
Good choice on my part.
What are we covering?
We're covering something that happened a long time ago, or maybe it didn't. We're talking about the death of a terrifying, horrible man. We're talking...
Franklin Delano Roosevelt?
Try again. Scarier. When you think of your typical video game or movie bad guy, what do you think of? Especially if there's lots of them and they're in uniform.
Stalin. Russians.
Try again.
Hitler. Nazis.
Yes, Hitler. We're talking about the death of Hitler, or the supposed death of Hitler,
Oh, yeah.
and whether or not it happened the way that we all think it happened.
The supposed death of Adolf Hitler.
My cat is on my show notes. He's on my notebook. He's kicking me in the butt to try to get me to move out of the chair. Stop it. So, while I try to get these notes from my cat, you tell me, what is the story you've always heard when you were a kid? What were you told? How did Hitler die?
Like that. I'm showing her
This is really great podcasting. He's showing me a picture.
a picture of a newspaper that was on May 2nd, 1945, the U.S. Armed Forces newspaper, Stars and Stripes. Top half of the page, bold print, Hitler dead.
Okay, but how did you hear about it? Because I'm pretty sure you weren't alive to see that newspaper.
No.
I mean, I know you're old, but you're not that old.
No, I'm not that old. My dad is not that old.
So how did you hear about it? What were you told?
I actually didn't find out about it until way later. I knew that the Allies won the war.
You didn't know right away that Hitler died? That wasn't, like, something you were taught along with the whole war?
Yeah, because basically, I don't know about your history curriculum throughout school is the teachers would say they'd have a topic and they'd have a lesson plan, but they'd never catch up to where they got to present day.
Oh.
And we almost never covered, like, oh, we're going to do American history. And we always got bogged down, and basically it's like, oh, we would cover, like, World War One, and then it would be May.
I
And then it would be no
actually
more
had,
schools
like,
days
really
left.
good history teachers. We learned a lot. In high school, I even took a whole English course,
Mhm.
actually, that was Holocaust literature.
Mhm.
So, but even before that, I think I had some really good history teachers, actually. So,
Yeah, I think in 6th grade we had to do the permission slips so we could watch Schindler's List. So I learned about the Holocaust, but it was like, there was a lot about, just like, oh, I thought the Holocaust was just all Jews. And it turns out it was 6 million, which is, out of 11, it's a majority, right?
yeah.
But it was also everyone else that Hitler didn't like, or like,
It was lots. It was
liberals and
lots.
artists and gays and professors
People that looked at him funny, or
right,
people
or-
that made fun of his mustache.
or that were part of the resistance, or yeah.
People that took their comb and made fun of the Hitler mustache.
And I'm not trying to minimize the Jewish Holocaust at all, because I know that that's something that
but a lot of people do
our
forget
current-
that there was a lot of victims.
Mhm.
And I think that's why, when I was a kid anyways, the way that we were always taught was, oh, Hitler was a coward and he killed himself before we could get to him. Like, that's how it was always, the very patriotic, like, before the Americans could get to him,
He took the coward's way out.
himself. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was that very much like he was too scared of us, big, powerful, strong Americans, And it's really funny because I actually didn't know until recently that it wasn't the Americans that found his remains, shall we say. It wasn't. Sorry, my friend just had a baby and I have to respond to a text.
That's okay. You'll cut this later in editing.
No, I won't. I'm going to leave it in because I'm feeling extra lazy. I'm allowed to do this.
Okay.
Who does the editing? That's right, me. That's why I always make myself sound better than Nicholas. I'll leave him be. He's just chewing tinsel. It's attached to something. He can't swallow it. Oh, he's just going to chew up my nice paintbrushes. It's fine.
Yeah.
He's cute. He's allowed to destroy things. Anyways, so here's the story. The official story. What we know.
Can I tell the official story?
No.
Okay.
Because I have notes.
I just get to react
You just read articles off your phone.
The
I do
official
my own
story
research.
and the unofficial story. I'm here for reaction.
Anyways, so on
May or April.
It's gonna be May. I'm trying to get my facts straight here. So we know that May 1st, that was when the Soviet army got to central Berlin. That's when they got to where Hitler was, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But what led up to it, I don't know if you... See, if I ask you if you know, you're just going to read from this article you have. I can see you. I can see you Googling
You mean
things.
the Wikipedia article?
Okay, I'm not going to let you do that.
It's pretty detailed.
I'm not going to let you do that.
Soviet army less than 500 meters from the bunker.
So on April 22nd, we have on record Hitler asking Dr. Werner Haas about reliable suicide methods.
Mm-hmm.
He was asking about cyanide pills, specifically gunshots, that sort of thing. And this led a lot of people to believe, he's going to try to kill himself. The head of the Luftwaffe at that time, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, he gets wind of this, and he sent Hitler a telegram saying, hey, can I take over? Like, straight up was just like, oh, you're going to kill yourself, right? So can I be you? Basically, can I be in charge? And Hitler was like, go fuck yourself. And he fired him. So... But it's very interesting that word got back that quickly.
Yes.
He was asking a doctor, and this doctor was like, loose lips, baby. He told everybody, and apparently this got back pretty quick.
Sunk
and he
the
was
ships.
Like, no, go fuck
you
yourself.
You sunk my Bismarck.
I did. On midnight, on April 29th, Hitler and Eva Braun, they got married in a civil ceremony. Kind of weird. This all took place in the bunker where Hitler was hiding.
Right.
They had a brunch afterwards, if you want to ruin wedding brunches. Which, here's the weird thing. So they got married at midnight.
Yeah.
They had a brunch? Does that mean they just, like, stayed up?
Yeah.
And had brunch?
He was on amphetamines the whole time, yeah.
I guess.
Like...
that was one thing that I had trouble with, like, the time of that. I'm like, okay, so was the brunch, like, they went to bed, then they woke up, then they had brunch afterwards? I don't know. Whatever. I don't care. I'm just very interested in Hitler's wedding for some reason. I'm like, why am I spending so much time thinking about this?
The whole thing
I think it's because I'm white and I heard brunch, and I'm like, oh, were there mimosas? Oh, wait, no, Hitler. Right. Doesn't matter, the brunch
probably
was involved.
Weren't oranges in the bunker.
You don't know. People brought him whatever he wanted. Anyways, so they got married, and then Hitler took his secretary, Traudl Jung, yeah. I can't even read my own handwriting, but that's okay. Nobody else can either. It's like a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Traudl Jung, he took him to a room, and he helped Hitler write his last will and testament. So, all right.
Traudl is a woman. She was in her early 20s.
Right. I've even seen like
photos
of her.
Or have you seen Downfall?
No, maybe.
Downfall is the German.
The one in German.
The one in German that's very famous for the scene where he melts down and when he gets told like, "Hey, you're surrounded."
It's so good.
And it's framed.
And that really did happen.
Like the
he
main
really
character
did have like
that,
a mental breakdown.
Yeah,
there.
The main character of that movie is basically like the experience of Hitler's last days through her eyes.
And so that's the thing. So we've got him breaking down, like losing his shit for a moment. But then he pulls himself together.
Forgive like any German speakers, forgive me, but I love the just that meltdown scene where he's like, "I'm time to die!" Like he's just like
Is that your
yeah,
German?
that's me doing like him screaming
You couldn't
German.
have even
I
just
know.
like said a word in German.
I'm going off of Bruno Gantz's performance
Gotcha.
in the scene because everybody's seen that scene dubbed over with like all
With
different
everything.
every conceivable
because
thing.
it's just so that's the one thing that I think is kind of funny is
It's kind of a universal like,
well,
hey, you're surrounded. There's no winning.
Well, not only that,
Like-
but like when you watch speeches and things that Hitler did,
Mhm.
video we have of him, people were like, he was so commanding, and it's just he seems like a fucking goofball. Like you look at him up there and you're just like, you fucking nerd, stop waving about, like calm your tits. Like he just seems like such an angry little white boy that it's funny to me that it's like he was seen as a compelling speaker, but I guess we have our current president that some think is a compelling speaker, and
he did the thing where
he just kind of waves about as well.
He tapped into people's patriotism and manipulated that.
I mean, I guess that's all there was to it, but well, but taken out of context.
Uh-huh.
If you can't hear and you're not digging it, what he's saying, if you're just like watching this, it's fucking hilarious, which is part of why I think people always want to use it for other
It'll be
stuff.
like a sports metaphor.
Yeah,
or
it's just
like...
so hard not to make it funny. But so I will admit that at this point, it does seem like okay, he lost his shit a little bit. He asked about different suicide methods. He's making a will.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The Soviets are 500 yards away.
Okay. Not yet.
And the Wehrmacht killed so many people.
This is true.
Like, they killed so many Soviets. They
basically... on the same day, the 29th, is when Hitler learned that Benito Mussolini was executed.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like one of his last allies, really, that he was hoping would pull through. So at that point, he's feeling pretty helpless.
He was like, ciao bella. Like, no.
Then he also heard that Mussolini and his wife, they were killed. Then people tied them up by their ankles, probably like did stuff to the bodies, whatever. Then they threw them in a gutter. People fucked with the bodies, peed on them, like destroyed them. Basically, the
Libya option.
Yeah, they just fucked up these bodies. And Hitler was heard to remark to people like, that's not going to fucking happen to us.
Right.
So even more reason people are thinking, okay, maybe this suicide thing really did happen. Okay, all right, fine. So then Hitler, the fucked up piece of shit that he is, decides he's going to test this cyanide. Do you know how he tests it? Because he's really paranoid. He wants to make sure it works.
I think on Goebbels' children?
No, on his dog, Blondie.
Oh, yeah.
On his own dog.
Yeah. What a piece of shit.
What a piece of shit. So he tests on his dog. He's like, all right, this works. This shit works. Okay. Then on the 30th, he meets with Helmuth.
Helmuth?
Gosh.
You're the German speaker.
My tongue ring got in the way. Helmuth Velding. He says that Berlin is less than 24 hours. So this is when he's telling him April 30th. He's saying, I predict we've got 30 hours. He says, can we attempt a breakout? Which is kind of like a last minute, can we try to just not really retreat, but just...
Well, you've been encircled. Like,
yeah.
Basically, it's to try to, like, basically split a double envelopment.
Basically, it's like, can we do something here that's not losing? Can
imagine,
we not lose?
Imagine you're surrounded. A breakout would be like, I'm going to break the circle. I'm going to get out of the circle.
Basically, like, can we just try something? So I believe April 30th, it's around 3:30. What's 15:30 in normal people time?
That'd be 3:30 p.m.
3:30 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then it was at 3:30 p.m. I thought this was in the morning. Damn it. Dante, stop it. Anyways, so around that time, the people that were closest in the bunker, they heard what they thought might be a gunshot or a loud noise. Hitler's valet, Heinz Lynch, he opened the door, and he claims, later on when he was asked, he claims that he smelled almonds. Of course he claimed that. At this time, it was very well known that cyanide. The smell of almonds is cyanide.
Or if there is no cyanide, it means you're having a heart attack. Go to the doctor immediately.
I hear it's
or if your mouth
burnt toast.
Mouth tastes like pennies.
A stroke.
Or a heart attack.
My mouth tastes like pennies a lot, but it's because my gums bleed. But anyways, he claims that he smelled almonds, which I think that's kind of weird because I don't know if somebody took cyanide. Would you be able to smell it?
Probably. Yeah.
They always talk about
Doesn't it
smelling
like foam in the mouth?
No, they always talk about smelling it during autopsies of people that have been poisoned with cyanide over long periods of time, and they smell it after they cut into their organs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you could smell it if somebody took a cyanide capsule. I really don't. Especially right after they died. Like, maybe if they had been sitting decomposing for days or something and you walked in and it smelled, sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of call shenanigans on that, and I think that was something added after. But he, along with another SS officer, Otto Gunsch, they said that they found Ava with her legs drawn up, and Hitler was at his desk with his head kind of slumped over and a hole in his head.
Uh-huh.
It appears that she took cyanide. It appears that he took cyanide and shot himself.
Yeah.
Okay. So they followed.
Because it's not painless, and it doesn't.
No, it's not.
It's not immediate either.
Which would explain why she had her legs kind of scrunched up. Like, it sounded like fetal position from the description.
Yeah.
Hitler left verbal and written instructions to different individuals, and they supposedly followed what he said. They took the bodies up to the garden, they doused them with gasoline, and they burned them. A group of their closest Nazi friends, basically the people that were left in the bunker with them, stood around and saluted as they burned the bodies.
Which is why they like Eddie Izzard's joke from Dress to Kill, where he talks about, so Hitler died covered in petrol, burning in a ditch on fire.
Yes.
That's fun. Because he's a genocidal fuckhead. Like,
yes.
That's...
It's actually technically after he died.
I know. But
here's the thing.
But okay. For the dramatic license, for the purposes of
comedy. Do you want to be dramatic?
Comedic license.
Comedic license?
Yes.
Dramatic, comedic. Comedic, dramatic.
Fine.
Dramatic? Dramatic.
Yeah, it's the sports night of Hitler jokes. Well, it's a comedy drama.
I keep banging my wine on the table.
Cool.
Sorry. So then they went back in. They took the rug from the study. Mm-hmm. So the rug which they'd been lying on and bleeding out on, right? They take the rug. They went and they supposedly burned that rug with the bodies.
Uh-huh.
And Werner Schweidel, he picked up a bullet, like a spent cartridge, and it was lying near a pistol, so he picked those up, pocketed those.
Mm-hmm. Hitler's PPK.
Sure.
It's a Walther PPK. It's James Bond's gun, actually.
So Hitler shot himself with James Bond's gun?
Yes.
Allegedly. Anyways.
Well, the Walther PPK...
You gave me the weirdest look.
The Walther PPK exists. James Bond's a fictional character, but...
And Hitler allegedly shot himself.
But that was the gun that he had, yeah. That was the type
cool.
of pistol that it was.
I wonder if they did that on purpose.
I wonder if Ian Fleming...
I guarantee that was probably intentional.
Well, that and he liked German guns, I don't know. He was a weird dude.
You're a weird dude.
Ian Fleming is a weird dude.
You're a super weird dude. Don't make a sad face. Embrace it. Be like me. You want a pair of cat ear headphones?
I'm good.
It'd be so weird.
Why would it be weird?
It was a joke. This is why I don't do stand-up. Because I'm not funny.
The corpses burned from 1600 to 1830. That's 4 to...
Stop.
What?
So the corpse is burned. And are you reading something that tells you what happened after that when the Soviets arrived?
The first inkling was basically a radio broadcast on May 1st.
So stop right there.
Uh-huh.
Well, the Battle of Berlin is still going on.
Being fought by children and elderly.
Long before the Soviets arrive, the Germans make a radio announcement that the Führer is dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they say Hitler's dead. And at that time, U.S. officials are like, holy shit, can we corroborate this? Is this true? Is this true? At that time, radio silence. Nope. Nobody knows if it's true or not. So basically, we're taking the word of Nazis that their leader is dead. Okay. Interesting. So, I mean, think about German propaganda. Think about Hitler. Think about propaganda.
Uh-huh.
When you think of the word propaganda, I think of two things. Nazis and...
Fox News.
Well, now.
Honestly, that's what I think about.
That's what you think about? You don't think about any, like, Soviet propaganda?
But yeah, you're like,
Like Comrade?
yeah, or like Perestroika, or like the Potemkin villages. Like, hey, we're gonna set up like villages that show how prosperous we are, and they're all hollow,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just there for
that's what I'm saying, though.
appearances.
When you think of propaganda, one of the first things you think of is, like, German propaganda.
Right. In the early, later on May 2nd, the remains of Hitler, Braun, and 2 dogs, thought to be Blondie and her offspring Wolf, were discovered in a shell crater by a unit of Red Army intelligence agency SMERSH.
Not true.
No?
So, what happened after the burning of the bodies, we have the Soviets arriving and a BBC reporter with them, and they find Hitler dead.
Mm-hmm.
And there's video of this. Well, then some doctors that were with them came over, took a look, they figured out it was actually Gustav Weiler, who was his body double.
Oh, yeah?
So it was not Hitler, and he was by himself. He was shot in the head, intending to make them think Hitler was dead. Interesting, right?
Sure.
Also interesting that the radio did not say Eva Braun was dead. Hitler was dead. All right, so we move on. They never found the bodies. Ever. You know how we have the official report that we have? The Soviets got to the bunker, found the remaining SS officers and the remaining personnel, and they interrogated them. And they said, oh, he died and we burned him. And we got rid of his body and you'll never find it. As soon as I heard that, I was like, bullshit. Bullshit, 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 bullshit. We're believing them? Seriously.
Uh-huh.
What are you thinking right now? Now that you know that, they never found the bodies.
I'm thinking that...
It's never been confirmed.
I'm thinking that they didn't want basically the equivalent of like the Red Army to do a rush, like a Roman triumph, and put in a cage with like Hitler's charred, remains.
I'm sure, but what did you say the first time when I told you and you were like, I don't want to do this, and you got mad? What did you say? You're like, that's not true. The British burned the bodies because they didn't want neo-Nazis going to the grave.
Right.
That's what you told me.
Yeah.
Same thing I heard as a kid.
But it wasn't the British, it was the Russians.
Propaganda. Why were we told this?
Communism.
As kids, we were told over and over, oh, the reason we don't have the bodies and never know what happened to them is we didn't want neo-Nazis.
To have a a place to...
That's what everybody said.
Pilgrimage, yeah.
No, we didn't find the bodies. We never found them. We didn't hide them. The British didn't hide them. The Soviets didn't find them. None of us found them. So it's kind of interesting that as a kid, I was told over and over again, well, of course we don't have the bodies. And it was just that thing of, wow, propaganda. Again, how weird is that? I mean, if it was just like, oh, it's cut and dry, he was dead, why have we heard, like, additional untrue facts? Mm-hmm. It's very funny. In 1945, the official reports don't mention a body at all. And again, these are eyewitness reports that we're basing this information off of. German courts didn't even declare Hitler dead until 1956.
Right, and the same article does say for politically motivated reasons the Soviet Union presented various versions of Hitler's fate.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about the Soviet propaganda is even though they were spouting lies to promote communism and detract against fascism and Nazism, is these two ideologies and these two different nations, they were the ones that fought the bloodiest feud of the war.
So why would they not be like, yeah, we killed him. We got there, we stormed in, we killed him, we burned him.
Yeah.
See, you can't answer that.
I mean, it worked for a time it created doubt. Basically, it's like part of it is a way to fuck with
Did
Americans.
you know that Stalin never believed Hitler was dead?
Right, I did, yeah.
Did you know that he continued to look for him? So the Russians found Hitler's remains and decided not to let Stalin in on that? Is that how that worked?
Yeah, because that would have been a safe move to lie to Stalin.
Right. They found proof that he was dead, but they just decided, like, nah, Stalin can we'll let him sweat it out. We'll let him figure it out. Eisenhower also didn't buy it.
Yeah.
The FBI investigated claims for years afterwards of sightings of Hitler. They never believed that he was dead. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember what year it was.
2009?
No, before that. Earlier, it was like, I want to say it was like 23 years after the end of the war, something like that. The Soviets were like, hey, guess what? We were lying. We totally have the bodies. And we've done some testing. And yep, it was cyanide. We have part of Hitler's skull from when he blew himself apart.
Mm-hmm.
His teeth show that he chomped down on some cyanide. We got this. Well, then in 2009, an American pathologist ran the DNA. That belongs to the skull fragments, the teeth. They belong to a woman in her 40s. That's not Hitler.
No.
So, first, for years, the Soviets are like, hey, we killed him. But then when people are like, there was no bodies. When people started to, 25 years later, people are like, hey, we have some questions. We want answers. They're like, oh, just kidding. We have his body. Here it is. So that's when they decided to change the story to like, well, duh, we totally have his body. Of course we didn't just decide he died.
Yeah, that was 1970.
Mm-hmm.
The Smersh facility, by then controlled by the KGB, was scheduled to be handed over to the East German government. Concerned that a Hitler burial site might be a neo-Nazi shrine, the KGB director, Yuri Andropov, authorized an operation to destroy the remains that had been buried in Magdeburg.
There's no official reports on that.
A Soviet KGB team was given detailed burial charts. On April 4th of 1970, they secretly exhumed 5 wooden boxes containing the remains of 10 or 11 bodies in an advanced state of decay. The remains were thoroughly burned and crushed, after which the ashes were thrown into a tributary of the Elbe. According to Ian Kershaw, a Hitler historian, the corpses of Braun and Hitler were already thoroughly burned when the Red Army found them, and only a lower jaw or with dental work could be identified as Hitler's remains.
That's the jaw.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the remains that years later they're claiming are Hitler's. That's the story we heard as kids. Oh, we don't want neo-Nazis, so we'll burn them. And then they test the remains. That's not Hitler. That wasn't him.
Okay.
And then before they even claimed to have the bodies, they claimed that the British stole the bodies. Did you know that? When it was questioned, the Soviets were like, oh yeah, the British took the bodies. They have Hitler. We're like, wait, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, they have Hitler. They just don't want to tell anybody. Why would they have Hitler's body and not want to tell anybody? How does that help anyone? What purpose does that serve?
I don't know.
Weird, right?
Because at the same time, the English king that had the prince who had abdicated the throne.
Yes.
Because he was a Nazi sympathizer.
Absolutely.
Before the war even started, yeah.
His wife was a Nazi sympathizer.
And then we get the king's speech. Edward, who was not. He was like, oh, my older brother's the king guy. I'm not going to be the king. And then the king guy's like, I'm a Nazi. I can't fight the Nazis.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that we have this.
White people.
The original report that we go off of, the original report in 1945, it was written by Trevor Ropert. I think that's how you say his name. He was a medieval history professor. Weird, right? That they were like, hey, you, medieval history professor, come here. Well, in his report, he makes it sound like he interviewed these Nazis that were there, and he wrote his report based on that. Well, later on it came out he didn't actually interview him. He got his information secondhand from the Soviets that did.
Yeah.
So not only is he that seems a little bit like falsifying a report to me.
Probably could be, information gleaned from torture.
Exactly. First off,
because we're talking about Stalin's Red Army.
Yes, all of pretty much everyone that testified or, gave up information while being interrogated. After the fact, they said that's not true. I made it all up to get them to leave me alone. They asked over and over again, so we gave them what they wanted. We made up shit. We were like, we just yes-anded. We're like, yes, he's dead, and we saw him take cyanide, and they just went with it. So I just find that really interesting that the British decided to have a medieval history professor write a report, which he sort of falsifies, saying like, oh, in interviews I did with these people, and then later it comes out, oh, well, I didn't actually do the interviews. I got this. So you're the third person. You're hearing this. Not only are you not even hearing it secondhand from an eyewitness, you're hearing an eyewitness's testimony under duress to another individual who's then relaying it to you.
Right.
That's where we get this story of what happened to Hitler. Nobody official in any official capacity ever saw remains except other Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going off of what the Nazis have told us, and we're just deciding that Hitler's for sure dead.
Well, I think he killed himself. I don't know what happened with the body.
I don't think he did.
No. Do you think
He
ended
doesn't
up
seem
with
the type.
Do you think he ended up in Argentina with a bunch of the other
I don't know
Nazi
if he ended
party?
up in Argentina. I don't know if that's necessarily true. My theory is more that maybe he escaped at that time, and we found him quickly afterwards and quietly disposed of him because we couldn't exactly say, like, remember when we said Hitler was dead 5 years ago? We were kidding. We were JKing. He's actually alive. We just now caught him. We need to have a trial. I mean,
Yeah.
it would be easier if he's already dead, like, just keep him dead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we've already said he's dead, think about some of our enemies now. If we suddenly decided, you know, to come out and say, oh, actually, this person's not dead.
Like Bin Laden.
Like Bin Laden. Can you imagine if suddenly Bin Laden resurfaced and it's like, oh, well, we're going to have a trial now. Well, what happened the first time? Well, didn't you actually kill him? Why did you say you killed him?
Right.
Who can we trust? You know, to avoid that, if something happened and Bin Laden wasn't really dead and we killed him, wouldn't it be easier to just keep him dead?
Right.
So that was kind of always my theory when I was a kid, is I always thought Hitler didn't seem like the type that could keep silent for so long,
right.
Especially as political climates have changed over the years. You think, I mean, now obviously, but even before then, because now how old would he be? Like 100 and...
If he was in his 50s and the 40s.
Yeah, exactly.
He would be 130.
30?
He'd be the world's oldest man.
So I don't exactly think he necessarily lived now, but even, you know, years ago, climate's changing. You'd think a man like Hitler wouldn't be able to keep his mouth shut.
Uh-huh.
He'd have to be like, you know, from some country where he knew he was safe and we couldn't get him. You think he would spout off? I don't know. Do you think he could keep his mouth shut if you thought that's the only way, like self-preservation?
Yes.
Do you think he would have more?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I always thought that he wouldn't be able to do that. He'd have like a blog or something.
No, he would have a painting. He'd have an Instagram
That's true.
account.
He'd have like an Instagram. No, I always figured, like, if he got away, could he avoid rubbing that in everyone's face?
Yeah, I don't think that was part of the deal, because at the same time, the Eisenhower and Stalin and Churchill were carving up Europe, and they were basically capturing the...
And Eisenhower and Stalin were looking for him.
Right.
I think, in my opinion, he did get away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he made it a few days,
I think
a
he
few
made it
weeks,
5 feet.
a few months,
Right.
a few years. It may have, because,
yeah.
you know, Germany doesn't have it down until the 50s that he died. They have it down in 1956, almost the 60s. That's when they
9 years later. Yeah.
That's
10
when
years
they
later.
claim to have. So, you know, you wonder.
Yeah.
Did he actually die? I just think it's so strange that we don't say Hitler is presumed dead. Mm-hmm. We don't say, per, you know, secondhand eyewitness. It's always told us Hitler is dead. He killed himself. It's cut and dry. There is no room for speculation.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to say that they believe Hitler made it to Argentina. Have you heard those claims?
Oh, that's a popular rumor about, like, what happened. And that's where, like, basically when you go find these guys who became, like, there's a series of movies. There's, like, a subgenre of movies about Nazi hunters. And they go find these ex-Nazis living in South America in the 70s and 80s.
They are in South America.
Yeah.
We still find them. I feel like, I'm going to say less than 5 years ago, they just discovered another prominent Nazi official living in Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the claim, is that he's in Argentina or Colombia. And the reason that claim happens is there is FBI documentation that they noted a submarine traveling from Germany to Argentina.
Yeah.
And it would fit the timeline.
It was an U-boat.
Yeah. And do I think that potentially people died in that bunker? Yes. But we know he used body doubles. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if people are looking from far away, you know, if the people that saw him last I'm sure most of them were in on it, and even if they weren't in on it, if you see a man that looks like Hitler and a woman that looks like Ava walking past a room where you're sitting, or
Yeah.
across a room, you're not going to think anything of it. And it may have been there was a lot of people that were so devoted to him that they would have been like, oh, okay, we're going to go in there, take cyanide, and shoot ourselves? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or some speculate that somebody held a gun to them, said, take the cyanide, and then they shot the Hitler double and then said, oh no, look, we found them dead.
Yeah.
But do I think there were bodies in there? I do. I don't recall reading that the Soviets also found signs of blood, but I believe they did. I think I don't have anything that I can say like in my notes that I for sure, but I feel like I've heard at least at one time when they went down into the main room, they did see evidence that somebody had died there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if they're going to sell it,
Well, for sure, Goebbels and his wife and their 2 children...
They did.
Definitely did.
Absolutely. But see, that's the thing. We have bodies. We know they died.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't hear it from somebody that heard it from somebody. We didn't hear it from the Soviets that heard it from the Germans.
Yeah.
We have bodies. And why didn't they take their bodies out and do something special with them?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I'm a curmudgeon.
You're a curmudgeon. You look so upset. Like, you're just like pouting. Like, why are you asking me so many questions?
Because the good guys won and the bad guys... It's one of those clear-cut...
I'm asking you questions because you got sassy with me. You're like, this isn't funny. I don't want to do this.
It's one of those
dumb.
Well, it's one of those clear-cut victories, but at the same time, if you peel back and look at all the declassified
Nothing's
stuff...
a clear-cut victory
it's like,
ever.
ooh, so much dirty stuff happening.
Always.
Like the war, basically the setup for the Cold War was prearranged in 1944 when we realized after Stalingrad, after the basically the German army, the Wehrmacht, couldn't capture Stalingrad and they started getting pushed back by the Russian army. They realized, okay, they're in retreat, and then the Allies landed, and it's like, okay, we've got them contained, and we're going to win this. It's just a matter of time, right? It's inevitable. It's going to cost lives, but we won. So what we have to do is we have to absolutely prevent their ability to make nukes.
Yeah.
Before we have to win before they can do that. And then they developed rocket technology, and so then we're like, well, shit. And then it's like, and then once the war was over, it was like, okay, well, you get this rocket scientist, I'll get this guy, and then we'll cut a line in the middle of Germany. But wait, Berlin's on your side. Okay, well, we'll draw this line.
We'll draw a line through.
Yeah, we're gonna say that this area, this road that goes from the dividing line into your territory, that's a safe road, and we're gonna cut Berlin in half. And that was kooky, and that was the way the history worked for 50 years.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
That's the thing is, when you think about all that weird shit that is just like, oh, we just decided, build a wall and make imaginary lines, and you own this and we own this. It's
right. And then they would each do these little power moves, after the war. The Stalin decided to cut off access to the road. So he basically isolated West Berlin, basically free people in the middle of this territory. So what did we do? We decided to just load cargo planes and do food drops for 3 years.
And that's the thing is, do you dispute that? No, that didn't happen.
No,
imaginary
there's
lines.
This thing called realpolitik. It's about politicians that make decisions that are fucked up and pragmatic at the same time. You don't know. If you knew what I knew at the time we knew what was going on, you would have made the same decision. Churchill, when he gets intercepts about which cities the Germans are going to bomb, and he realizes one target is more acceptable to lose than the other, and
what people always say about Pearl Harbor is that's another conspiracy, is that we knew it was going to happen. There's a lot of documentation that certain people did know it was going to happen, and maybe they kept their mouths shut, or maybe they weren't listened to. Maybe they said, hey, we're a target, and people were like, no, we're not, don't be silly. But
and FDR had been trying to get into the war for the longest time, and the Republicans were isolationists.
Yeah, and if he said, well, oops, if we, let this happen. But that's what I'm trying to say is so much with politics, it's, it's war games, it's bullshit like this that...
It muddies everything, yeah.
It could very well be that that he didn't die in that bunker. And I just think, maybe he didn't make it to Argentina. Maybe that's a bit much. But I don't believe it. I don't believe he died in that bunker.
Okay.
I think if he did, the Soviets would be like, we're going to interrogate the fuck out of you till you show us where those burnt ashes are. And we are going to take pictures. We are going to do exactly what you said. We're going to put his head on a stake. We're going to go the 9 yards. We're going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, being the way they were, you claim like, oh, they were so mad. If you said to me, oh, the Soviets got there first, of course Hitler was dead. There's video of them finding and cheering over the dead body of who they think is Hitler, and then they find out, oh shit, it's just a body double. They're there videotaping. They're like, yeah, we got him, a bunch of soldiers. Of course they would have done the exact same thing if they found even a shred. Why didn't they, like, videotape them all, you know, hanging out around his burned
Right, pass
remains?
the jawbone around.
Exactly. Why weren't there photos of that? Why wasn't it documented? You think a bunch of soldiers that got there first were like, oh, we're going to keep this secret for political reasons. Like, we've got our reasons. Like, no, that didn't happen. And I especially don't think Stalin would have wasted all that energy looking for Hitler. Like, he would send people looking for him. Took up a lot of his time. People said he kind of obsessed over it. Like, no, that fucker's not dead. He's not dead. And, okay, maybe, you know, you can put that down to paranoia, but show me the proof he's dead. I won't believe it until I see like a tiny shred of DNA or something. Little ashes, something.
So what were some of your sources for this if people want to read further?
The internet, actually.
Okay. I'm just saying if you're curious about the subject and you like to do more reading.
You can look it up. I found a really good and interesting article on Business Insider, and this is about the declassified FBI files that raise some questions, and this is the one, I didn't talk about it too much, but this one has a lot of information about Hitler maybe making it to Argentina via submarine. There was a reporter who had a friend that came forward with a story, and I guess the information he had was good.
Yeah.
But when they went back to talk to him, they couldn't find him. He was just MIA, wouldn't come forward ever again. And his information's been redacted in the FBI files, but you can actually look at these declassified files that have all sorts of information about it.
I would again recommend watching the Bruno Gantz Downfall movie. It's definitely
of course you have to watch that.
Also for like the greater context about like basically we think Americans have kind of been conditioned to think that we won the war. We came in the war in basically the fourth quarter. Like we like.
That's why I thought it was so funny.
1944 was Germany, like as us landing in Normandy, and then the war was over by 1945.
And yet, when I asked you, you got so like, no, we won, he's dead, that's it.
I know.
Even you are conditioned, so conditioned to just. No, red, white, and blue.
And
we got him.
I'm saying, like, basically, without us, I don't think victory would have been possible.
I think it would have. It would have taken longer.
Well, I'm not talking about the Soviets. I'm talking about like the French, the British, the Allies, right? The Scandinavians.
There have been a lot of reports showing like what would happen if America wasn't in the war and stuff. I don't have any sources.
But we lost 600,000 people. 600,000 troops in both theaters combined. So that's a little over 500,000 people between Europe and Pacific. The Russians lost 20 million. A good podcast for kind of context is you'd have to go online. He charges a premium now. I think it's like $1.99 an episode. But there's a 4-part series by Dan Carlin called Ghosts of the Ostfront. It's about the Eastern Front of the war, what the Russians called the Great Patriotic War. Because basically they were facing annihilation and they were being invaded by land by a massive blitzkrieg army who'd already rolled over like France and
I would highly recommend his podcast. He does a lot of research. It's just full of information. It's that long because it has to be. He could probably even do longer. The funny thing is if you search leave the kitty be, he's gonna scratch you. If you research like the Hitler teeth or Hitler jaw, there's a lot of articles that still say Hitler definitely died in 1945 according to new study of his teeth. That's from Telegraph. If you go on the telegraph.co.uk, this article has not been amended. This has not been, in fact, this article says it was written in 2018. And this article again says they have been given fragments of his teeth, which they match to his dental records.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we know that his teeth and that jawbone belong to a woman. So, very interesting. Explain that. Does that mean that a lot of people do think that they had been planning to fake Hitler's death for a long time? Could they have gone so far as to replace his dental records? Easy.
I would say that's pretty
the easiest
feasible
thing in the world.
That's pretty feasible for the top 3 intelligence services in the world to figure that out. Whether it's KGB and SMERSH, whether it's MI6, or whether it's the OSS, the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
They were in basically the early stages. OSS was basically just a bunch of like special forces guys. But but it would have been like British MI5 and MI6.
I don't think anybody at that time was thinking like, oh, DNA has to match.
Mm-hmm.
So what if they did replace his dental records with that of a woman and then kill her because they're like, oh, we're gonna burn her.
Like the Golden State Killer, where he's just like he was prolific until DNA started mattering. Yep.
Because if you think that we're gonna burn these bodies so bad no one's gonna be able to tell if it was a man or a woman,
mm-hmm.
like maybe there was 2 women down in the bunker. Who knows? Maybe they didn't bother to use a body double at all. They just killed bodies and burned them out front. Who knows? Maybe they were people that pissed him off and he was like, you and you get to be us.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't say I have all the answers. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I know for surezies he did not commit suicide in that bunker.
That's something, I don't know how you can say for surezies he didn't.
He didn't.
You have to leave it open to say it's possible.
It's possible, but I doubt it. They didn't have enough time to hide the bodies well enough. I don't think so.
Okay.
And after years and years and years, you think at least one of them would have cracked. One of them would have been like, yes, it's true.
Yeah, because what do they have to lose after, oh, what are you going to do, offend Nazis in 1950?
I don't buy it.
Okay. Well, this has been Campfire Curmudgeon.
You're going to end it like that?
Yeah.
You're not going to say anything? This was me just telling history to people.
Uh-huh.
This is fun.
What do I have to say? I don't have anything that refutes that.
You didn't do any research?
No, I'm saying the official story doesn't refute that.
Yes, it does. The official story. The official story says they're dead. That's it. The end. They were burned. So there.
And they were maybe buried in a KGB SMERSH camp, and then resurrected, grind into bits, and dumped in the a tributary to the Elbe River. It's possible that happened too. I don't know.
But that's where they got the jawbone from. So either they really fucked up.
Mm-hmm. You have to drag that river. Oh wait, it's a river.
You can drag a river. You won't find little bitty bits.
Yeah, but what if it's all muddy on the bottom?
What if it's all muddy at the bottom? I'm just saying, I think it's much more likely he did not die in that time and place.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more likely that he died elseways and elsewhere.
Okay.
Well, this has been Campfire Curmudgeon, where Heidi tells you a conspiracy and Nick goes, okay.
Thank you for your input.
Welcome to part 2 of Campfire Curmudgeon, episode Hitler's Death. Addendum. Heidi
Nick's
was right.
not so much of an asshole this time.
Well, just because Heidi's right. I was just like, well, the official story is he died and they dumped his ashes in the river Elbe.
So
that's the KGB.
What happened with the first half is Nicholas thought it would be really easy to just go nuh-uh to everything I said, and then he found out I was slowly convincing him, which made him mad and pouty. So then we watched.
Like all curmudgeons, we were like, let's do the evidence thing.
So then he was like, fine, I found a documentary. We're going to watch it. Halfway through, what did you shout?
Fuck you.
Fuck you, you're right. He didn't die in that bunker. So this time we're going to have the curmudgeon on my side.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to have you being so curmudgeon-y. So do you want to give a synopsis of what you found compelling or just the episode in general?
Yeah, we watched several episodes of it was a 2008,
I think you said?
let's see, This is exciting radio. November 2015 to present. There's 3
Oh, okay.
seasons, but it's on the History Channel. It's on Hulu if you have Hulu.
It's amazing.
It's
What's the name of it?
called Hunting Hitler, because in 2014, the FBI declassified, actually an executive order signed by Barack Obama,
Yes.
declassified a bunch of classified documents regarding Hitler, the appearances of Hitler,
And
sightings of
these
Hitler.
were the very documents I told you that I had seen before they were declassified.
And I was
because
like,
it was
"Yeah,
beforehand,
bunch of
you didn't believe
bunch
me.
of bullshit." But the show is like hosted by Bob Baer, and as soon as I heard that, my ears perked up like a little cat. And because I've read Bob Baer's book, See No Evil. Bob Baer is a 20-year veteran of the CIA. He was basically the movie Syriana. George Clooney's character is based off of his life and career, except for spoilers for that movie. He doesn't die. Like Bob Baer didn't die in a targeted airstrike at the end of the movie.
Spoilers.
But after retiring, he came across these documents, and he's like, "Hey, I want to use these documents and do like a proper investigation."
Well, what's funny about these documents is I had seen these documents heavily redacted online years ago. Like when I was in high school, somebody had gotten a hold of them and they were going around, but of course...
2014?
No, years before.
Oh, when they were redacted.
Before they were declassified.
Right, okay.
So they were stolen, clearly. Somebody had either photocopied them, taken a picture, somebody had leaked these documents, but because it was before they were declassified, a lot of people thought they were bullshit because you couldn't really prove anything. Like, so what, I can put FBI on, anything and say, but, I had seen these, and then once they became declassified, I was like, oh, holy shit, I remember seeing these. That's so cool that these were actually legit, and, they weren't fake. Now we have proof that these are actual FBI documents. And so what did these documents contain?
They contained a lot of information in, like, basically post, 1945 through to the 1950s of citing, Nazi activity in South America, specifically Argentina, because after World War One, there was a German exodus, of Germans after World War One. The German economy and the German people were punished because of the Treaty of Versailles. And the League of Nations, basically for losing the war that cost everybody a large part of
give
their...
everybody a synopsis for those that haven't taken a history class in a while.
Well, for those after World War One, basically the Germans were punished by the rest of the world because everybody lost so many people in that war. Like the male populations of Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, France, Britain, like they were decimated. Like there was that generation had been basically slaughtered and put into a machine, like a meat grinder, as they call it. That's and so as punishment, they basically enacted sanctions on Germany. So Germans that could fled. They went, a lot of them ended up in America. A lot of them ended up in Argentina. And I don't know, apologies for any Argentinians listening. What we think of in terms of Argentina is they're very fair-skinned. They do speak Spanish, but they have a very European Spanish, population.
Yeah.
That was friendly towards Germans.
They were very friendly and still are very friendly towards Germans. When you hear about a lot of these Nazi hunters going out and finding Nazis that were accused of war crimes that are finally able to stand trial, they find a lot of them in Argentina. So it's unfortunately a stereotype, but it's a stereotype that has some basis.
Not just some basis.
There's basis, yeah.
There's, I think the second X-Men movie with Michael Fassbender as Magneto starts in Argentina, where he kills 3 Nazis. In Argentina. But what happens with the episode is they find these FBI documents and they realize, basically off of coordinates saying, there was this rural area that's 100 miles north of this town and 200 miles west of Buenos Aires, they basically do a Venn diagram and they find, okay, that's going to be this coordinate.
Well, the reason they were looking at this town was it was a known fact that there had been reports of an underground bunker, that the people who had moved there from Germany, who were known Nazis, there was known Nazi parties and organizations, they were known to have a bunker, and the FBI knew about this, but unfortunately, because of the way the documents were, it did not give them a specific enough coordinates for it, so that's why they did that diagram, to try to figure out it's somewhere between here and here.
So they extrapolate that, and they go visit this town, and the first thing they do is they stop by the school, and the school is all German paraphernalia and insignia and a lot of the stuff that you would see.
They interview an individual who says there was Hitler Youth organizations there.
In the 30s and 40s,
yes. And they asked him if he was a part of it, and he wouldn't answer.
Yeah, he got really clammy, and he was just like, even the Special Forces guy who's been like, if you're in Special Forces, you know how to interrogate people, and you know how to ask questions in a way where you're going to get your answers. And he goes, the way he just kind of clammed up, it's like he's not telling us something.
Yeah, we're not going to have to keep pushing because he's an old man and we're not going to get anything out of him. The other thing was they found where they believed there was an old farm style house. They
talked to the head, they basically have a couple Argentinian contacts of Nazi hunters, because this was filmed in 2014, and there are people there that are on the ground that know the history of the towns and stuff, and so they go to the local records place, and they get told about this farm that's way out in the middle of nowhere.
And that farm was one of the places they thought could potentially be where the bunker was.
Say, this is a general store. And it's like, this is a general store miles off the trail of
it was a general store in the middle of nowhere. And they asked them, they said, well, we heard reports that your parents who purchased this farm discovered a Nazi bunker underneath it.
Yeah, they bought the house in 1956.
Yes. And both owners of the house go, oh, no, it's just a root cellar.
Yeah.
Or what we would call a root cellar here was the Argentinian equivalent, which most people that live not in Arizona but elsewhere in the U.S. think of a root cellar as usually pretty crude.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, some people still call their basements that, but
what I think of a root cellar is kind of like the basement of the movie Arachnophobia, because he moves into that farm and it's basically a dirt floor, and he's got a wine rack, and he's got some because it's nice and cool down there.
That's exactly what it would be. It'd be where they would store cool drinks, like they said we kept beer down there, things like that. But they're claiming it's a general store. It's in the middle of nowhere. The individuals that were interviewing them, they already knew that they lived very near a large German population, so they asked them about it. And they claimed, no, there's never any Germans. So
Complete
we
and
know
total
you're lying.
denial, yeah.
Sorry, my sprinklers are on. I was like, why is the window wet?
We're in Arizona.
My sprinklers shouldn't be coming on right now. Oh, well.
So then after they basically say we know that Argentina had a large network of
Argentina?
Argentina. Argentinian.
I'm sorry, I got y'all confused.
There was a large Argentinian underground railroad network of Nazi sympathizers and supporters already pre-baked into the cake by the time the Nazis lost the war.
Yes, long before this. So when they were asking these individuals, there was, Germans around here?
Could this have been the number one stop?
No, there was no Germans around here ever. And they were like, okay, they're scared.
Can we see the root cellar? And they're like, okay. So then they go into this barn area. They find these wood slats.
Their scared little translator was like, this is very unusual.
He's like, is this typical
area?
To have basically carved into or almost paved into stepstones that go down?
It was like a cement bunker.
At least 15 feet. Not like one story, but they went down. He's like, you can't even see the bottom.
Yeah, he was like, no, not at all. You got the impression he was like, I don't want to fucking go down there. He was just like, this is where I die. But it was definitely not just packed earth like normally a cellar for that time period in that area would have been.
No, poured reinforced concrete.
Yes, and they were like, okay, this is probably one of the bunkers they were talking about. This is one of them. And it was just so crazy, though, how the people that lived there were still scared because there is still a large German population. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of Nazis or Nazi sympathizers in that area, and they probably were just like, I'm not fucking speaking out against them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that. We'll disappear. We're out in the middle of nowhere, like you said. We'll end up in that cellar. So they were just like, nope, no Germans here. We don't know anything about that. We don't know anything. And that was kind of what a lot of people said as soon as they asked them.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we're trying to do the, history of like German people here. As soon as Americans started asking about German people in Argentina, the Argentinians were like, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anything.
You don't know say.
Immediately. And they were just like, okay, interesting. All right.
And so then the second episode is them like looking through, okay, so we've got our starting point with this. Maybe this is the first bunker. Maybe this is the entry point into this network. And then there was an FBI report about a road that went from this rural area through the jungle into a more kind of suburban population, a city that was basically 100 kilometers of jungle, and it was just a road that they said the Nazis controlled because there was no local police, and the road wasn't really well traveled. Well, go on this road, kind of scan. I don't know how they found it, but they came across a series of 3 or 4 buildings which had been made out of stone, a quarry that was carved from rock at the top of this mountain and then carried down. Like the top building was like a lookout post. The second building was used as a
home.
No. The second building was the mill, I think.
He said it was a home that had a mill running underneath it.
Right.
To generate electricity for the home.
They created like a plumbing system to generate electricity. And then there was the home portion where like you could see like, oh, this is a 2-bedroom house with like white glass tile bathroom
for the bathtub.
Yeah.
The house itself had yellow and blue tiles, and
they found Nazi coins and artifacts in it.
Yeah, everyone there doing the dig, they were like, this is not typical at all for a jungle house. Jungle houses in this area at this time would have been kind of crude, like
made of mud.
Because they were in the jungle, away from civilization, away from the tools to do this. You don't have people with money living out here.
Yeah, because a lot of it was just stacked bricks and rock until you got a square shape, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why they were so interested in finding out who lived here,
who built this.
And when they were finding all of this Nazi and German paraphernalia, they were like, oh shit, it was clearly a high-ranking Nazi official who could not, and they were like, here's the weird thing, high-ranking Nazi officials lived out in the open in Argentina during this time period, during the 50s, no problem. Like, it was fine. Yeah. So who was it that had to stay away from everybody? They were kind of thinking.
Right, because they profiled the one guy who lived under the name like Ramon Carlos.
Yeah.
He was like, I can't remember the name of the actual Nazi official, but he was high in the Nazi party. Mm-hmm. And then he ended up being like the owner or operator of a factory in Buenos Aires.
He ended up just being a factory worker.
Right, yeah.
He was just a factory worker at a Mercedes-Benz
right, in a German automobile factory.
And just working there unassumingly.
So if somebody high-ranking can just live in plain sight, who's carving out this this? Basically, it wasn't in a grid. They created their own grid with like power sources and water and plumbing and everything. Who's living in that?
And it's funny because I still don't know if he made it out of Germany. They also found indications that a lot of people thought that he escaped on a U-boat, because there were U-boats that did escape to Argentina, like during this time, from the last few days that Hitler's actually seen by the public to when the war ended and all that. There were actually subs that made it there, but I don't know if that would be the method that he would take, because it seems like kind of risky to be in a U-boat at that time.
When there's a blockade and there's so much in the North Atlantic, there's so much of the U.S. Navy.
Because a lot of people flew out at the time, just flew out in commercial planes.
I think that's what the third episode is about.
Yes, they found what looks to be tunnels leading from areas that would...
No, that was the fourth episode. The third episode was basically, they went back and they're like, well, they found a guy who was like a U.S. Marshal, and he basically specialized in finding fugitives and fugitives that have faked their own death. And the first thing you do is you look for primary sources, witnesses that saw.
He basically went through everything I said in the first episode as to why it's bullshit, because we're believing...
It's all secondary sources and the Russians.
It's third sources. Yeah. We're hearing it third hand from Russians who heard it from Nazis. Almost nobody actually spoke to the Nazis themselves, and when they did, it was after the fact, and they denied most of what they had said. They said, that's all bullshit, we didn't say that. So he basically went through that, but they were showing that it looks as if there is tunnels that would have led from Hitler's bunker all the way to the airport.
Yes.
So he could have been, they think, maybe shaved head, shaved mustache,
Yeah,
given
Lenny-
glasses,
he
something
had-
like that to make him look pretty different.
Uncovered a escape route from Hitler's bunker to a nearby Tempelhof airport where multiple
Yes.
Nazi airplanes took off under the cover of darkness. Now this is on I think April 30th. It was reported this happened. Basically, a bunch of airplanes did leave, and the Hitler and the bunker and all that activity started like May 1st, May 2nd.
And I'll look for it to put up on the Instagram and the Facebook, but there are FBI files where after the war they were looking for Hitler, and they have all these photos of Hitler in different disguises, with different hairstyles, with glasses, and it's kind of interesting because you take away that signature mustache,
The
you
Michael
cut the
Jordan
hair,
mustache.
and there's not really anything to identify him as anybody special. He's very plain looking once you take all those, identifying
Yeah, he just looks
features.
like a sepia middle-aged man, right?
He looks like a dude, yeah. So it's very plausible that maybe they did shave his head, shave his mustache, give him a pair of goofy glasses, and stick him on a plane. The main thing that I have trouble getting over is I always wondered when I was a kid and I first heard about this, like, hey, something's, funky with Hitler's death. When I first started looking into this, early days of the interwebs, dark web shit, my big thing, though, was, would he really keep quiet? If Hitler made it to Argentina and survived there for years, lived out a life and died, would he have been able to keep his mouth shut?
Right, because his whole existence was basically, but after he was a World War I vet, he'd already been jailed for trying to overthrow the German government the first unsuccessfully the first time. Then he writes a publicity horror book called My Struggle, saying like, I'd be on top of the world if it weren't for the goddamn Jews. And then,
and everybody
don't
else.
take that out of context. I know somebody could edit that and just like, here's Nick's saying, I'd be on top of the
No,
world.
don't even put it out there.
Goddamn Jews. But then he does actually become Chancellor of Germany, and functionally, at some point,
Sorta.
he is on top of the goddamn world. He's like, I'm king of all I survey.
Yeah, we heard about how
their fear.
he would have people fly to Paris to bring him goodies that he wanted, baked goods
like
and
caviar
stuff. Yeah.
and croissant.
Croissants. Baked goods and stuff that he wanted.
So
but,
you're emperor of everything, right?
Well,
and then
that was what I always thought, but at the same time, when you think about it, they had kind of planned. There is some talk, I can't remember the name of the documentary that we watched the other night, little bits of. I'll put that up. It was a conspiracy theory documentary on Netflix that I think it might just be called like Conspiracy Theories.
Yeah, the show has the word conspiracy in it,
and there's a Hitler episode, and they talk about how before his final days, they set in motion long before his closest caretakers essentially started setting in place, like a backup plan. They started moving assets. They started basically making it so he could get out of there and he could have money. He could have a means of existing. And it may be that, he had heard this for months of like, well, we've got a backup plan. And then as, they start losing the war, he's got this in his head. And it could be that he finally was like, fuck it. If I want to live, I'm done. I gotta die.
Yeah. And
it could be that he finally came to terms with that. I do find it hard to believe.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to put Hitler on the couch.
Right. Well, it's just hard for me to think that somebody like that could just be like, no, it's cool. I'll just pretend to be dead forever. Especially since one of the big concerns with Argentina.
You think he's like Roger Rabbit, where he can't resist the shave and a haircut. He's got to come out and say 2 bits. He's
going to jump out and scream 2 bits. That's exactly like what I was thinking is he can't. As soon as somebody's like, Hitler, he'd be like, no, I'm Hitler. I'm Hitler.
Hitler can't not be Hitler, right?
Yes.
As soon as somebody starts talking about how much bullshit Hitler is, he's like, I'm Hitler. Like, you think it's an ego thing?
Kind of, yeah. And I think, too, one of the concerns of the FBI, of the CIA, of individuals during the war was they knew that there was lots of different groups of Nazis all over the world, especially in Argentina, and that's a real quick way right there to North America. That's North and South America. They were like, they could just take over. they could take over the Americas. And they have like sleeper cells all throughout, basically. So that was their concern.
But you know what that's preferable to?
Hmm.
Communism. That's the other thing is like American government.
I don't think.
No, American government's much more comfortable with like right-wing authoritarianism than
not during the middle of World War II.
No, I'm saying post-World War II.
That's not what I'm talking about,
Okay.
though. So you're gonna have to hold up.
Okay.
I'm talking about during World War II.
Uh-huh.
A major concern was these sleeper cells.
Right.
That they had basically waiting to be activated, because there wasn't. Nazis didn't take over Argentina, but they had the numbers they thought that they could, so that was their concern, was they're going to take over South America, they're going to come after North America, they're going to activate all these sleeper cells they have, and, we're going to be attacked where we are. That was something that was actually being thought about, and then even after the war, yes, it was something that was a concern, and it's why it's something that to this day is still watched. It's still something that the FBI takes seriously, is could these individuals try to, rise up? Are the sleeper cells that big of a threat that they could eventually, try something? And that's why I always wonder, did Hitler make it there? Or, did he end up there and, get killed immediately? Or did he get killed on the way or beforehand, before he got there?
Or when did he die of old age? Because he did have diseases.
Yeah, they say he did, but there's some things, like certain afflictions people can have pretty much their whole life. I mean, my grandma had COPD from the time she was fairly young, and she didn't pass away till she was, in her 80s. So, I mean, that's a whole life of having, a condition that didn't really...
Right, or he might have died
take that many years
Franco's Spain before he ever made it there, but the network was still set up for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, the network wasn't just like, oh, the war's over, quick, let's build this house with this nice bathtub. These things were already in place. They were already ready for him. They already had several backup plans. So it's not unusual to think that, just because these are there doesn't mean he made it there, but it also doesn't mean that he didn't.
And one of the things they reference is basically the key to staying hidden is to stay mobile. They mention specifically Osama bin Laden. One of the reasons he got caught is he stayed in Abbottabad. He was in Abbottabad after Tora Bora for, they suspect,
he was there for a long time.
At least 7 years. So it's okay, yeah, he didn't leave the compound. He would go for walks in there, but he would stay there for 7 years or many years, and he didn't relocate. Part of it is because the Americans did a good, and the Allies in the global war on terror did actually effective jobs of cutting off his resources and his other possible escape routes, but didn't really have anywhere else to go.
He would have if he had kept moving.
Yeah.
But by the time we caught him, he wouldn't have been able to. But that was kind of the point, was that if Hitler did indeed escape to somewhere in South America like Argentina, if he continued moving around, he could very well have escaped until it was something where he was kind of put on the back burner.
Yeah.
And then he could easily settle down somewhere with an assumed name, be a farmer, whatever, and people wouldn't think too much of it when they've got a bunch of other Germans living around them. It's just... I just think that he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Which is why I'm not certain that he did actually make it.
Do you think he was do you think he was fragged by his own people? Just he's gonna expose the whole network.
Potentially,
and they killed
absolutely.
Him. Yeah.
It could have very easily been something where they were
war's over. The whole world's against us.
Yeah.
They're putting Nuremberg is putting people. They're just hanging whoever.
Especially if he was out in the middle of this jungle.
They're hanging the Nazis they can find. And he's like, oh, we got to rise up again. And it's well, no, dude, we have an okay life here.
He could have, it's just, there's also, it's funny because there used to be so much information that you could find about Hitler moving to Indonesia and becoming a Buddhist or something or an Islamist.
Yeah, you researched a little bit of that, and I think...
Here's the thing, I can't find information on it anymore. Okay. You used to be able to, I was talking with our producer Chris about it, you used to be able to find pictures of a grave that was a grave to Hitler in Indonesia, because he supposedly lived there, died there, all that jazz.
But now all you can find is a resurgence of neo-Nazi...
Now all you can find is Indonesia had a museum, a wax museum, where people could take selfies, and they had a forced perspective, they'd have a wax figure and then a forced perspective scene behind that person so you could take selfies. Well, they had one of Hitler, and so people's Instagrams and Facebooks were filling up with pictures of them selfieing with Hitler, and a lot of people were like, isn't that just a little disrespectful to all of the Jewish people and others that died during the Holocaust? Isn't that kind of disrespectful? And the museum was like, no, it's fine. But eventually they were forced to take it down, basically. And that's like the only thing you can find now. So it's very difficult to find any information about it.
Well, you were reading an article last night. I think it also said like Indonesia or Malaysia or that Pacific.
There was some.
There's like a neo-Nazi subculture.
Yes, but it was very weird because it wasn't a neo-Nazi subculture. It was a Hitler subculture.
Yeah.
It was like Hitler
like
worship.
non-Aryans.
Yeah, it was very unusual, and that's what they said. They said a lot of people that are like obsessed with this. Like they had a bar that was Hitler themed. They don't actually really know what Hitler stood for.
They just like the accoutrement.
Yes. And that's the thing that...
Like, I like the leather, I like the marching, I like...
Well, I remember at one
I like the
point,
Roman salute, I like the...
Somebody said something like, man, they knew how to dress, and it's like, yeah, they were their outfits were designed, their uniforms, by designer brands that still exist to this day.
Gucci?
I don't...
Or Italian designers or some kind of thing.
No, I don't know about that. I know Puma and Adidas. So, yeah, they were designers for them. So, unfortunately, some of the youth there are like, oh, this looks cool. But the funny thing is, I remember my dad remarking one time, like, that looks like a Nazi uniform. When there was some, like, AT&T commercial or something, I'm like, no, it just looks like a generic uniform of anything during World War II. He's like, no, it looks like a Nazi uniform. I pulled a history book we had off the shelf, flipped through it, pointed to an American uniform, and it looked actually more like what he was seeing than it did. And he was like, oh. Well, I'm like, that's just the fashion at the time.
Right.
That's just how the uniforms were. Everybody's uniforms kind of looked the same.
And nowadays our troops wear the same helmet style because it's more effective. Like the SS kind of like the American, you paint it desert camo and it's our helmet. It's the one we use. Not the one with the pointy stabby thing.
I don't know about that, but
I'm not I'm not a military expert, but
no, I just know that like the pants that were like riding style type pants that were a little bit poofier, that were pulled into boots that went up to the knee, that kind of uniform style was prolific in pretty much every country at that time. It was just the style. So, but things like that they've latched onto, they've decided it's cool, but they've also decided, that just the whole Hitler thing is awesome, which is shitty, and that's a lot of what you find here. I did find one Facebook article, and this was from 2010, and it says, if anyone keeps an article newspaper clip from Pikaran Rakyat, I'm sure I said that wrong, in 1983, there was an interesting article written by Dr. Sosrashusudo, definitely said that wrong,
good lord,
about his experience met with an old German doctor named Poch in Subwama Basar Island in 1960. So he said that this old German doctor, he had a big hospital, and he just worked in this hospital kind of under the radar, but the weird thing about him was when Dr. Sosro met him, this German doctor spoke about Hitler, and he had some of, I guess, the same anomalies. Like, he dragged his left leg when he walked, and his left hand would shake. And he had a Charlie Chaplin-like mustache, but with a bald head. So, during one of the battles, I'm sure it says in this article, I can't remember. Do you remember what battle Hitler does? He suddenly began to have a tremor on his left side. He got so stressed out that he developed a tremor that never went away.
No, I don't remember.
Well, let me see if this article says it. But he developed this tremor.
This is a World War I battle, right?
I think no, too. And this doctor had that same tremor.
Well, it would have been the Battle of Berlin because he never actually saw combat.
Might have been.
Or it could have been the von Stauffenberg.
It wasn't a battle he saw combat in. It was when he was hearing back about what was going on. He was in charge, and he became so stressed. Oh. He developed a tremor that never went away. Stress can do really weird things to your body.
There could have been several battle moments, I would think. The the retreat of the British Army to Dunkirk would have been. I mean, they would have been on the offensive. It could have been the Battle of Berlin, where he sent the Air Force to bomb and fight and destroy the British Air Force, which was unsuccessful. He switched tactics and decided to go after and just start bombing London instead of bombing the Air Force, and that basically gave the British Air Force some breathing room and allowed the British Air Force to stay alive, which prevented the invasion of Britain by Germany. It could have been the halt of the German advance at Stalingrad, which basically was where it was the turning point of the war, where they started retreating back out of Russia, and that started the end of the war. It could have been the last offensive against the Western Front against the Allies. It could have been the Battle of the Bulge, which is basically the last attempt to try to punch through the Allies' line, and that was unsuccessful. And then at that point, it was inevitable that they were going to lose the war, at least on that side.
Yeah.
Because if they could have punched through and won the Battle of the Bulge, they might have been able to stop
regardless,
the advance.
I don't know which.
There are at least 3 or 4 different moments
don't really care. Just I know
command.
That he was so stressed that this happened.
Yeah.
At one point, to this doctor, he kind of figured out that there was some psychological trauma that had happened to this doctor, and this Dr. Pach, and he asked him about it. And he said he asked his wife in German, and she replied, "It happened when the German army was defeated in the battle near Moscow, when Goebbels told you about that, and you were hitting the tables repeatedly." So she was saying, it's because you bashed your hand. You did it.
Yeah.
She's kind of lecturing him about this.
Yes.
And this other doctor's like, well, holy shit, what? Excuse me. Like, that sounds like Hitler. So
the German advance into Russia.
Who else would have freaked out like that? So.
Well, he had Moscow surrounded for a while, but he didn't advance on it.
So,
and that allowed them to stage a counterattack.
Yes. And after, I guess, this doctor died, people tried to speak to his wife to try to figure out what she knew.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave Dr. Sosro all written documents belonging to her husband, including wedding photos, driver's license that had his fingerprints on it, all of this information. In one of the written documents, there's a notebook that inside it had foreign names of people living in various countries all over the world. It had a lot of stuff that they couldn't really make out, but it was all in German. So they thought that was kind of interesting that he had like what seemed like names of where people were living, like other maybe Nazi officials or things like that.
Please reach out to Dwight Eisenhower, New York, New York.
I don't know about that, but it's kind of interesting if this is true. And if someone does have this, I would assume we have Hitler's fingerprints on file. Maybe not. I don't know. Doesn't it seem like that's something that could be fairly easy to test?
Sure. Who knows? I don't know.
Interesting.
This is what you listen to the show for. A lot of like, I don't know.
I don't think so. The interesting thing too is this: the wife. She was his second wife, and she said one day she saw her husband shave his mustache like Hitler, and when she asked about it, he said to her, "Yes, I'm Hitler, don't tell anyone."
That sounds
a bit like what the fuck.
Well, it sounds like
bullshit.
Every man has like in the practice of shaving his face has always shaved it like before they shave the whole thing. Sometimes you shave your mustache or you shave your face into like, I wonder what I would look like with Elvis mutton chops. So you do that in the mirror just to see, and then you're like, nah, and then you keep going. So it could just be like, yeah, I'm Hitler, don't tell anyone. Like that's a very husband thing to do,
right? Just to fuck with her because he's German and he knows like. But it's also really interesting because there at one point was a lot of information online that there was more evidence of him ending up in Indonesia. And just because there's all this evidence of him being in Argentina doesn't mean he didn't then move on and end up in Indonesia eventually.
Right.
We don't know that. That's the thing is, if he did end up in Argentina, if they moved him because, if they were like, ooh, it's too hot here, there's too many people that know that they're Nazis, like, this is where they're going to look for you. We got to move you somewhere else. Who knows what country he could have ended up in.
Well, there's a ton of Europeans that got scattered throughout the world post-World War II. Like, for some reason, like, I don't know why, but Arthur C. Clarke, the writer of, like, 2001, the prolific science fiction author, ended up living in Sri Lanka for the rest of his life after the war. And it was just like, that's where he lived. He lived in Sri Lanka.
A lot of it's because they were living in slightly more rural areas where they would kind of get away from everything, away from
the
stress
British
of the war.
stiff upper lip, and
Well, no, a lot of these people, you know, it's like now what we're discovering is PTSD is a real thing, and when we bring soldiers back, they're a little shaken and rattled, and sometimes civilians in certain areas can have that. Like if you think about people that lived in areas that were getting air raids in, you know, the UK, that were having bombs dropped on their buildings in London, things like that.
The Blitz,
Of course, they're going to be a little jumpy, and it might be nice to get away and live somewhere quiet with no air raid sirens, and that doesn't look like your nightmares.
Right.
It looks very different and is peaceful, and you can just sit outside for a long time. So it's not that surprising to me that there was a lot of Europeans that just wanted to get away from that.
So, like, for me, the opposite of that would be a college math class.
Yes, like your college math class nightmare.
I had a college math class anxiety dream last night where I'm like, I'm not going to pass this.
Is it because I keep telling you to see how much your credits are worth?
And then I got up to leave the room.
I gave you a stress dream.
Yeah, and then I got up to leave the room in the dream, and the instructor was like, Mr. Jones, and I was like, yes. And like it was just like, she goes, I hate you, and I'm like, and I'm like, ow!
This is why I won't go to college.
Like, you're making me divide 3 numbers into 3 numbers, and I don't understand, what is that? Like
don't talk to me. I haven't taken a math class since high school.
No, I'm talking about it was like dream math that would have been impossible to do.
That's how all math is to me.
Right?
It's all dream math. That's why I got it all done before I went to college. I'm like,
Like, give me finite math.
No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, like bank math, compounding,
you were
interest,
trying to
all that
teach me
stuff.
some basic math, and I was like, if you keep trying, I'm going to stab you in this parking lot right now.
Right.
There was like a couple watching, phones out, because I was yelling at you in a parking lot. I was like, don't you try to teach me math.
Yeah. Here's how you do a conversion. No,
I was like, don't even. But
but when you get into like anything calculus or I was just like, I got
stress dreams.
My freshman year of college, I got pulled out of calculus class because they let me enroll in it, but I didn't test into it. So they're like, we fixed the glitch. You can't go to this class.
Oh,
it's okay. I didn't finish.
But it's not surprising that people ended up all over, and it would be very easy for a German to just blend in somewhere with other German people existing, not standing out, not looking special, if he could keep his mouth shut.
It's like Nebraskans noticing each other when they're not in Nebraska. It's like, oh yeah,
that happens to you a lot.
Go Big Red. Yeah, like. And then I'm back in Nebraska, and I'm like, everybody's Go Big Red. This is why I left. Like, everybody's the same here.
But that's the thing is, could he keep his mouth shut?
9.
I'm very skeptical of that. Did he die in that bunker like they said he did?
Probably not.
No, absolutely not.
No.
He did not die there. There's no indication. Nobody saw the bodies. The bodies were wrapped up in the rug, or the rug was brought out later and thrown on top of them. There's just so many different explanations, different ways. None of it was really firsthand. None of it was credible sources. That's like, taking the word of the man that runs on the street naked screaming all the time, like, well, he told me that he saw this. You're like, oh, you're going to take his word for it.
No, here's what it is. It's not the crazy person. It's the person with an absolute blood feud who hates that. So, we burned him. We totally burned him.
Absolutely burned him. Why would you take your enemy's word for it?
Yeah, like,
it's just
like, wait, no,
me.
you have every reason to not burn him. Like,
but you know what I mean? It's funny, though, that it's like, it's the same thing of if suddenly that man was considered credible. Like, why would we suddenly consider the Nazis a credible source?
Yeah, you have every reason to turn him into a trophy. Why would you say you burned him? And
that would make no sense. What would make more sense is them secreting his body away.
And then Stalin's pissed. Yeah.
Secreting his body away, and then years later making it like a hero worship site for people to come.
Yes.
Which is exactly what nobody wanted. But that would make a lot more sense as plans to do something like that.
What you do is you put the hero worship site in the middle of the place where they're despised the most, like putting the Holocaust Museum in the United States, or like basically Stalin could have put Hitler's grave like next to the Kremlin.
He wouldn't have put his grave anywhere. He would have made a mockery of him.
Right, and I'm saying like
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the Nazis.
No greater
the
enemy.
Nazis had every reason to hide his body.
Yeah.
Bring it out later. Make some place for people to go to worship him later. That makes a lot more sense to me than, we just burned it and they chopped it up and burned it some more and threw it in a river. No, you didn't. Because how is that really treating his body any differently than what he didn't want?
Yes.
Like, if you're saying you desecrated it in that manner, like, broke him up into little bits and buried him and unburied him, and it's like, no, you didn't. You did not. You
Yeah.
didn't cremate him until he was nothing but ash. That didn't happen.
We did this for you because we expected you to do this exact thing. No.
Yeah, no, you didn't. I feel like if Hitler had committed suicide and the people in the bunker knew about it, they'd get the fuck out. They wouldn't be like, we're just going to wait here. This is fine. We're just going to burn him, and we're going to wait. We're going to wait for the Soviets. No, you stay there because you were ordered to hide the fact that he escaped.
Right.
Because your orders were to stay there and be witnesses to, yeah, we burned him.
Yes.
That's why.
Because the Nazi hierarchy wasn't, like, it didn't have a line of succession. It was the Führer or nothing. Like, they didn't have really a line of succession or parts of the Nazi government that could operate independently. The whole that would have been dangerous, and because he was already paranoid about assassination attempts.
Yeah.
From, like, von Stauffenberg's plot to blow him up.
Well, I just think that because there were and still are a lot of regions with German populations that happen to have a lot of Nazi-leaning individuals, it's just kind of very conspiracy theory-ish, but it's just kind of interesting to think that they could, still be kind of like sleeper cells waiting for the right moment, which is freaky right now because we have all these like neo-Nazis and dumb fucks that think it's okay to be racist and everything.
Or fascism. Like, they're not just like, I'm not racist, but I'm into fascism. And it's like, where's this fascism love come from? What the fuck?
It's very weird because it makes me wonder, like, could exactly what the FBI, Eisenhower, everybody feared, could it be exactly, could the reason that Hitler never spoke up was because he saw that it wasn't the right time, and the time wouldn't be until after he died, but he was, maybe he has a protege somewhere that he passed on all of his hate to that is just waiting for the right moment. You talk about him like
he's a Sith Lord with a Sith apprentice. Like,
I mean, in a way.
Like, who's the Darth Maul to Hitler's and Darth Sidious?
I was talking more about, like, royalty, but alright. Just, you know what I mean? Like,
who's his successor?
Waiting for the right moment.
Yeah.
For the world to be in a state of blame again. Like, who should we blame for our problems?
Immigrants and poor people.
Because that's what
and the other.
That's what Hitler needed the first time. For Nazism to work. You have to need a scapegoat.
Yes.
And that's what concerns me is you've got essentially sleeper cells of hate, not just Nazis, but other hate groups.
Right.
And if they all decided like, hey, let's, my enemy is the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Yeah.
If they decide that, are we going towards trouble? Are we headed towards that weak spot that they need to have a resurgence?
Here's the point where I would hope our listeners try to check themselves before they wreck themselves is when you think about the politicians and the movements that whether it's activism or the things that you do support politically, would you rather do you support democracy, or would you like to install a dictator that you agree with? Right? Because there's a wide swath of people that either on the left and the right, they could basically be like, well, I don't care. We just need somebody who I agree with who can actually take charge of everything.
The other thing that I like to remind people of is when Hitler first came about, he was a bit of a laughingstock. People made fun of him. People mocked him.
Yes.
Even the fact that he got to where he
Well, and the Nazi Party never even got more than 43% of the vote.
No, they were mocked until he gained so much power that it was like, oh shit, that guy that we thought was just like a fool.
They started to form a coalition government. Right?
Yeah, and that's the problem is sometimes we tend to look at people that are spouting hate and spouting stupid information.
And say, oh, they're tiny, they're marginalized.
We don't take them as seriously as we should, and we're just like, oh, look at that funny man yelling and waving his arms about. But what we don't realize is if we don't take it seriously and strip this funny man of his power, if we keep allowing him to have power, eventually we could end up in a situation. I'm not saying I think the United States is a second away from a Nazi regime. I'm just saying that, years from now, if we continue the path we seem to be going, if we're not careful, if we're not checking who we're giving power to and why, then we could end up in a situation where we, wake up one day and we're like, ooh, this isn't where I wanted to be.
Right, because Ben Franklin, after the Constitutional Convention, was asked by an old lady. She goes, "What have you created in there?" And he goes, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it."
Yes.
And so keeping the republic is what I'm in favor of.
A lot of people that described living in Nazi Germany, they said it didn't happen overnight. It just was so
It was a frog
small.
It was a frog in a hot plate.
It was so small they didn't notice the changes until the next thing they knew. Their dad was being dragged off just to be a Nazi in the war, and they didn't have a choice. They didn't have a say.
Yes.
And that's something we got to remember is whether or not Hitler died in that bunker.
The ideas are
the
still
ideas, his ideas did not die.
And
the
also
Nazi Party did not die.
And also the tactics for fascism are always going to be the same.
And that's the problem is with an organization like Nazis, terrorists, anything like this. Once you take down the leader, a new one just emerges. And we need to take things like that a little bit seriously. And it's kind of fun to like go off on these conspiracy theories. And I too truly believe that he didn't die in that bunker, but we can't lose sight of the fact that this is history that did truly happen. This is not fiction. This is not a book.
Right.
These things do exist. Some things that people want to write off as conspiracy. If you do the research, you'll see.
Oh, it's never going to get to that point. Well,
that's how it starts.
At what
people
point?
Always say that.
Yeah. At what point would you recognize the switch from our present situation to tyranny? Like, it's not going to be like, oh, somebody's going to flip a switch and say tyranny, right? It's eroded in pieces and bits.
Laws regulating your body,
yes.
And things like that. Just keep an eye out. Constant vigilance. Always be watching, and always be remembering that the reason we study history is so we don't fall into the same traps as those that came before us and make those same mistakes. We want to be able to see it coming this time around.
Okay, and I think that's enough of the soapbox. But I think that we
never enough.
Well, I would hope any listener of this is like, yeah, fuck fascism. Because if you're listening to the Hitler podcast and you're hearing us talk about Hitler and we neglect to say, like, we don't want to go down this road, like, then you're missing the point of entirely. It's fun to talk conspiracy, but, the whole point of it is, well, A, governments keep secrets. B, ideas can be dangerous. And even if someone has the freedom to express that idea, it doesn't mean it should be indulged or tolerated.
Agreed.
And we need to keep the campfire burning.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, campers, thanks for listening. Got any scary stories? Send them to campfirecurmudgeon@gmail.com or message us on Facebook. You can even send a text or leave a voicemail at 480-442-0124. Don't forget to visit us on Instagram and tweet us at CFCurmudge.